Hey guys, Bartel's Bookshelf here, and I'm adding yet another name to the birth year book tag, which was a book tag that was recently created by the wonderful CriminOlly over at his channel, so I recommend you all go check him out. And I was actually tagged in this challenge by Juan at Plagued by Visions, so I guess I'm legally obligated, right? Although I was already going to do this before I was tagged, so that just gave me the push I needed, I guess. So if you don't know, this was a book tag that was created by CriminOlly, basically based around it's a bunch of book-related and movie-related questions based around the year you were born, and the year you turned 18. So I was born in 1992, the same year as Juan, and he said it would be interesting to see what our sort of different answers would be, and I agree, especially because a lot of his answers were very interesting, obscure, or just, very, very, very interesting and insightful picks as usual, and I felt a little bit basic with mine, but here we go anyway. Okay, so the first question is, have you read any books published in the year you were born? If so, what's your favorite and why? So I did my usual thing. I went on Goodreads and I looked up books published in 1992, and I went down tons of different ones, and I realized I haven't actually read that many books from when I was born, but I've read a few. I've read about 3 or 4. Oh yeah, and if so, what's your favorite and why? So I'll work up to my favorite. I'll just talk about the other ones I've read since it's not that much. I read Jesus' Son by Dennis Johnson, which is a very well-regarded collection of short stories that revolve around this unnamed narrator who's sometimes called Fuckhead, and his sort of drug-related adventures. To be honest, this one didn't really work for me. I know it's like a well-regarded classic. People love it. That's why I read it. But I don't know. I just something. It was very beautifully written, I thought. Like, some of the writing was really nice. And there were a lot of like interesting sequences and sort of depictions of sort of the ravages of sort of drug use and drug addiction. But I don't know. It just didn't really leave me with a lot at the end. Maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm just an idiot, but I didn't really enjoy that one. I guess you would say that I respect it, but I didn't really like enjoy it. I don't know. And the second is Goosebumps. So I believe the first three or four or five Goosebumps books all came out in 1992. And of course, like a lot of millennials, I was a big Goosebumps fan growing up. Just recently read the first Goosebumps book for the very first time, Welcome to Dead House. I read that over Halloween. So yeah, and Goosebumps, of course, is a part of my childhood. I love it. It's a special place in my heart. But of the books I've read from 1992, my favorite would have to be The English Patient by Michael Undatier. This is a very famous novel. It was a Booker Prize winner in 1992. It was made into a very famous movie with Ralph Fiennes and some other people, Willem Dafoe and some other people. I haven't actually seen the movie, but I read the book, I think, in 2019 for the first time, and I was surprised because I'm not normally like super into like very literary things. But I thought this was a really wonderful book. It was beautifully written, a wonderful sort of era-spanning story about this mysterious English patient in a hospital in World War II. Nobody knows who he is, just that they assume he's English. And sort of the intersecting lives of the people in this hospital and how they all sort of converge. So there's the nurse that's looking after him. There's an Indian sapper who ends up there, and the nurse's, I believe it's her uncle, Caravaggio, who's a thief. I read it like a few years ago now, so I don't remember all the details, but I just remember it was very beautifully written. The wartime setting was very evocative. There were some really just like earth-shattering lines, and it all sort of culminated in this really fascinating story about sort of colonialism and sort of like the British exploitation of the Indian people and things like that. The capacity that humanity has for destruction. It was just a very beautiful book. I really, really liked it. So, and it's always nice when you read a book that's, unlike Jesus' Son, where, sometimes you read a book that's like very well regarded and an award winner and stuff, and you just don't really get it. It doesn't click with you. That one really clicked with me. I actually really enjoyed it. I would like to watch the movie at some point. I just have to be kind of in the right mood for that kind of story. Next question is, do you have any other favorites? As I said, that's pretty much it. I haven't read a whole lot of books from the year I was born, so I just put NA for that one, not applicable. If you haven't read any birth year books, which one do you pledge to read in the next 6 months, and why have you chosen it? Well, I chose this one just because it was in the list of books that were published when I was born, and I already owned a copy, so I don't have to go out and buy anything. And also, I have read birth year books, obviously, but I just like the idea of sort of pledging yourself to read something from the year you were born. It's a cool challenge. I like that, so I chose this book, Poor Things by Alasdair Gray. Of course, this was published in 1992. Alasdair Gray was a very famous Scottish novelist, sort of postmodern. I don't know. I don't know a whole lot about him. I just know him by reputation. Really, he also wrote Lanark and 1982 Janine, which I have copies of. Lanark is supposed to be this like sprawling, weird, sort of semi-sci-fi surrealist epic, and 1982 Janine is this very like experimental sort of a pornographic novel. They both sound very interesting, but this is the one that was from the year I was born, and I've been meaning to get to this for a while, so I will read this at some point. As far as I understand it, this is sort of Alasdair Gray's riff on a postmodern revision of Frankenstein that replaces the traditional monster with Bella Baxter, a beautiful young erotomaniac brought back to life with the brain of an infant. So it's sort of as it said, it's a riff on Frankenstein. It's very postmodern, very strange. It sounds like it's going to be very harrowing, but also very funny, as a lot of sort of UK literature can be, sort of straddling the line between horror and humor, which is something I enjoy. But it sounds like there'll be a lot of interesting things about, in that, the scientist created a woman and he's sort of like in control of her. It seems like there'll be some interesting themes about sort of women and the control of women in society and things like that. I don't know. We'll see. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. I've been wanting to read this for a while, ever since Jen, I think her name's Jen Campbell, recommended this. So I'm hoping that's good. And I would like to get to Lanark and 1982 Janine as well, because I own copies of them. I just haven't read them, like so many other books that I own. But yeah, so that's my pick for 1992. The next question is, have you read any books published in the year you turned 18? If so, what was your favorite and why? So this is also an interesting one, because I've actually read even less books. I think sort of the idea behind it was to see sort of if you read more books from when you were younger or from when you were older. Like, do you read more modern books? Do you read older books? And in my case, I actually found that I read mostly older books. And when I looked up books that were published in 2010, I'd only read two, neither of which I would call sort of literary classics. I mean, they're not horrible, but... so I don't really know what I would call a favorite, but I read Lord Sunday by Garth Nix, which is the final book in the Keys to the Kingdom series, I believe it's called, which is a sort of a middle grade fantasy series involving this boy named Arthur Pendragon, who ends up sort of becoming inadvertently the sort of savior of this universe where everything is like controlled by an anthropomorphized day of the week. It's very strange, and it's really, really surreal, but it's interesting. I enjoyed it for what it was. Like, it wasn't earth-shattering or anything, but it's very imaginative. I don't remember a whole lot about this specific book, but I remember liking the ending of the series, and I just remember liking a lot of the weird imagery. One of the ones I remember in the second book is there's like a literal like living pair of eyebrows, I think, that like flies around and stuff. There's a lot of like crazy stuff like that. And then the other book I've read that was published in 2010 was Shit My Dad Says by Justin Halpern, which, of course, as most of you know, I'm sure, was an adaptation of the very popular Twitter account where Justin Halpern posted crazy, funny, weird shit that his dad said. And yeah, I mean, I read this a long time ago, but I just remember, it was okay. It was decent. It was decently funny. I didn't think it was earth shattering or anything. It was all right. Most of you, I don't know if any of you actually remember this, but they made a TV show of it with William Shatner as the angry dad, and like that was a piece of shit. I think it only lasted for one season, and I remember watching clips of it when it came out, and like I was just like, "What the fuck is this? This is horrible." Yeah, so like when I would, and also I think also part of the reason I haven't read a lot of books from 2010, or sort of like when I was like alive, I guess, I don't know. I wasn't reading a lot at that time. I read a lot when I was younger, and then there was kind of a really long fallow period where I was mostly focused on movies. I read books here and there, but it was only in the last 7 or 8 years that I really got back into reading. So there's just a lot of stuff that has come out in my lifetime that I've sort of like missed out on because I wasn't keeping up with what was being published at the time. But yeah, so there's that. Oh, and this isn't part of the original tag, but I just thought this would be fun. Similar to the 1992 question. If you haven't read any 18-year books, which one do you pledge to read in the next 6 months, and why have you chosen it? Again, I just picked this because this was one that I already owned. And yeah, like I said, choosing a book from when you were 18 wasn't part of the original challenge, but I just thought it would be fun, so I chose this one. This is no, it's a little scuffed. This is Mr. Shivers by Robert Jackson Bennett. This was his first novel, I believe, and he's I believe these days he's much more famous for like what was that series called? Oh, I gotta look it up now. Oh, okay, I got it. Yeah, so yeah, he's probably more well known these days for the Divine Cities trilogy, which the first novel is City of Stairs, and the Founders trilogy, the first book of which is Foundry Side. I've seen those around. I've heard a lot of good things, but this was his first novel, and this won the Shirley Jackson Award in 2010. I don't know a whole lot about it except that it takes place during the Great Depression, and it's about this guy looking to get revenge on the scarred vagrant who murdered his daughter. And of course, it's implied that the man who murdered her is more than a man. So yeah, it sounds really creepy. Sounds like it's a really interesting sort of a time period for a horror novel. I don't know. It just sounded interesting. So we'll see how that is. The next question: of the last 10 books you read, how many were published? How many were published before you were born? Well, as I said, most of what I read, I think, tends to be, if not published before I was born, kind of published when I was very young. But of the last 10 books I read, 6 were published before I was born. It goes on to say, what were they, and did you prefer them to the newer books? So I won't go too much into detail with these because there's 6 books. I don't want this video to be forever long, but I read On the Heights of Despair by Emile Cioran, which was published in 1934. And I'll talk about it. I read that in this month, so I'll talk about that more in my wrap-up. But it's a work of pessimist philosophy, written by a very famous Romanian philosopher who eventually fled to France, and I think he lived in France for most of his life. And that was a really interesting book. As I said, I'll talk more about it in my wrap-up, so I won't get into that right now. But it was a very I haven't read a lot of philosophy, but it was very short, very sort of easy to grasp, and very sardonic. But yeah, I'll talk more about that eventually. Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson, which was published in 1883, and I talked about in my December wrap-up. That was a classic book. That was a lot of fun. Really enjoyed that. Hell House by Richard Matheson, which was published in 1971. Again, I talked about in my December wrap-up. I sort of had mixed feelings about that one. There were some things I liked about it, some things I didn't. Interview with a Vampire by Anne Rice, which I have a review for. A classic book. The Necrophiliac by Gabriela Witkopf, which was published in 1972, which I also thought was really interesting, very beautifully written, very transgressive, very disgusting, but very very funny as well, very I don't know, very interesting. I liked it. I'm not that insightful, I'm sorry. And then the last one was Nights at the Circus by Angela Carter, which was published in 1984, and again I talked about in a previous wrap-up. Angela Carter is one of my favorite writers. We're actually buddy reading, we're doing The Bloody Chamber for Juan's book club over at Plagued by Visions, his Vision of the Month. I've already read it before. It's one of my favorite books, but rereading it, of course. I'm not going to turn that down. So yeah, Knights at the Circus is also a great book. Wonderfully surreal, magical story of the turn of the century, and circus performers, aerialists, and women with bird wings and things. It was a great book. Did I prefer them to the newer books? To be honest, I don't think I really discriminate that much in terms of year. I do tend to focus on older stuff, but I don't tend to be that guy who's like, oh, this is new, like it's bad, like I just read whatever sounds interesting to me. So I liked them. A lot of these I loved. I mean, Knights at the Circus, The Necrophiliac, Interview with the Vampire. Like, I loved a lot of older books, and I do love a lot of older books in general. But I don't tend to like really think about that. Like I just like books. I just like books, man. I'm just here for books. Now we move on to the second half of the prompt, which is based around movies. What's your favorite movie from your birth year and why? Again, I was born in 1992. As I said, before I got back into books, I was like way into movies. I watched tons of movies. I still watch movies, just not as much as I used to. But yeah, back in like high school, man, like I was like movie obsessed, like movie, like just that was like what my thing. So I couldn't just like pare it down to one movie. I was gonna do 5, but I was like, no, that's maybe a little bit too much. So I decided to do 3 movies. So 3 movies from 1992 that are some of my favorites is Army of Darkness, of course, the classic Sam Raimi film, third in the Evil Dead trilogy. I love this movie. I watch it every Halloween. Not every Halloween, but I watch it a lot. It's so quotable. It's so funny. I love Sam Raimi's like splat stick sense of humor. It's just, yeah, it's a classic. Bruce Campbell, you can't go wrong. I love that movie. Similarly, Brain Dead, Peter Jackson's Brain Dead, also known as Dead Alive here in America. Again, a classic splat stick movie. I watched this again a couple Halloweens ago with some friends, and I just was reminded of how much of just a fucking riot it is. It's just so much fun. It's so wacky and gory. It's like a gory Looney Tunes cartoon. Like I love it. Like just for sheer, just blatant, like in your face, like audacity of just insanity of just going like, whoa, like I can't fucking believe they did that. Like Brain Dead, man. Like Brain Dead is the one. It's so much fun. It's so silly and stupid, but it's like so well made, and it's like funny, and it's so over the top. It's great. I love it. And the last one I picked for 1992 was Bernard Rose's Candyman, which I believe Juan also mentioned in his video. And yeah, based on the short story The Forbidden by Clive Barker, which was in volume 4 of the Books of Blood, I believe. Yeah, I love this movie. This is actually one of my favorite Clive Barker adaptations. It's not... It really more kind of uses the story as like a springboard for kind of developing its own ideas, but I think it's still very faithful to sort of the idea of the story. Of this whole idea of like urban legends and how stories can live on through the telling of them and things like that, and how like urban legends are often connected to the culture and the places that sort of spawned them. Yeah, this is an amazing movie. It's one of my favorites. The score by Philip Glass is beautiful. The atmosphere is like, it's like chilly and creepy. Tony Todd is amazing as Candyman. He's got such a hypnotic, like bassy voice. He's like scary, but he's also like romantic. It's just such a great movie. The ending is amazing. I actually reviewed this years and years ago on my YouTube channel. You can probably find it if you want to go searching through my old videos where I talk about it at length. But yeah, it's a great movie. It's one of my favorites. I love all the stuff it has to say about urban legends and sort of gentrification and things like that. I haven't seen the new Candyman that came out recently, but I've heard a lot of good things, so I do want to see that at some point. But yeah, so Candyman is my third pick. And then we have, what's your favorite movie from the year you turned 18 and why? So again, I turned 18 in 2010, and I was surprised how many movies I saw from 2010, but a lot of movies I saw, well, I guess maybe not, because I graduated high school in 2010, but during that time period, in my senior year of high school, I was actually writing film reviews for the school paper. So I went to the movies a lot, even more than I usually did. So I saw a lot of movies, but not a lot of movies that really like left an impression on me. But there were some. One of which I didn't see in theaters, but Juan mentioned it in his video, so I decided I would bring it up too. So the first one is True Grit, directed by the Coen brothers. This is a really great gritty western, a sort of neo-western from the Coen brothers. Just very atmospheric, very beautiful. Roger Deakins' cinematography is gorgeous. It's been a while since I've seen it, but I just remember really enjoying it. I love a good western, and the interesting thing about their version of True Grit is that it's actually it's quite a straightforward western, but it's just done really well in their like inimitable style, and so there's no like kind of you can tell they really love the genre, if you know what I mean. There's no like nodding and winking at the camera, like, oh, you know, it's not like a parody. Like it just feels like they really wanted to make just a really solid western, and I think they did a really good job. Yeah, that's a good one. Haley Steinfeld, I think that was kind of her breakout role. She's fantastic. I believe she was nominated for that. She deserved it. She was so good. And she was only like 14 at the time. It's crazy. And yeah, of course, Jeff Bridges is great in everything. He's awesome as Rooster Cogburn. He's just a surly asshole. I love him. So yeah, that's a great movie. I would recommend that if you're into westerns. Of course, in 2010, we had Toy Story 3. And again, as a millennial, I mean, I couldn't not talk about this. To me, this was just the perfect send-off for the Toy Story franchise. It wrapped things up so beautifully. The emotional arc for not only Woody and Buzz and all the toys, but with Andy and all the things it had to say about sort of letting go, moving on. It's just it's so beautiful, and I admit it, like I cried at the ending when I saw it in theaters. I was bawling. I still get emotional whenever I watch that movie, but of course, I mean, Pixar are great at that, aren't they? Yeah, that's an amazing movie. I thought Toy Story 4 was okay, but it just felt kind of superfluous. I know, like, that's maybe a controversial opinion, but I just thought it was okay. It was well made. It had some good stuff in it, but it just felt very unnecessary. One of the things that I love about Toy Story 3 is, again, how it sort of wraps everything up so beautifully. Like, there's that shot of the clouds at the end of Toy Story 3, which mirrors the opening shot of the clouds in the first Toy Story. So it's like this very beautiful, like, cyclical sort of ending at the beginning kind of thing. It's beautifully done, and then they kind of shit all over that with the fourth movie, but whatever. And then, as I said, the last movie that I was going to talk about from 2010 was one that Juan mentioned in his video, and I was like, you know what? Yeah, that is a good movie. And that is Birdemic, Shock and Terror. And you know what? Like, I think Juan made a really good case for this. Like, it's not a good movie in the traditional sense of the word, but it's definitely compelling. It's ridiculous. It's audacious. It's full of. It's one of those bad movies that's like, it's not just bad. Like it's legendarily bad. Like it's one of those things where you're just like, I cannot believe what I'm seeing. I cannot believe someone made this creative decision. It's just it's like a perfect melding of just of eagerness and sincerity and ineptitude, and it's just so amazing. I mean, I've watched Birdemic like 6 or 7 times. I've watched it tons of times. That's more than I've watched, like, good movies that I actually enjoyed. So I mean, that has to say something for it, right? So yeah, I agree with Juan. This is a classic in its own way, much like, you know, The Room or Plan 9 from Outer Space. Like, there's certain things like that come along once in a while that are just like transcendent in their trashiness and their badness. And I respect that. You know, I respect that. I respect people who just regardless of any talent or ability or resources, they just go out and make a movie, you know, and fuck what anybody else thinks, you know. Like, I respect the hell out of that, you know, and especially in the case of something like Birdemic, where it's just it results in this just wild, crazy, insane, just bonkers experience. So yeah, I would recommend that if you're a connoisseur of trash. And then the last thing is tag a channel for every decade you have lived. Well, like Juan said in his video, technically I turned 30 this year, but I don't want to tag 3 people. I honestly can't even really think of 2 people I could tag that haven't done this already, but whatever. I'll tag Austin over at Monster Blood, and I will tag Whimsy Dearest over at her channel. So yeah, there you go. You guys have to make this now. I've tagged you. You're legally required. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope, I don't know, you found that interesting. I just rambled at the camera for 26 minutes, but yeah, let me know if you have anything else to say. Like, what would be some of your answers to these questions? Do you like any of the same movies that I liked from these years? Did you like something different? Do you agree with my picks? I mean, you know, whatever you have to say, just let me know. So yeah, thank you for watching. That was Bartell's Bookshelf, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.